Hey y'all, I wanted to pop on and I wanted to talk about something that I was thinking about on my walk yesterday. And I know my last pod was, forthright on femininity. And with that, and like how I talk about how I feel having PMDD and shit like that, which is just a diagnosis that means nothing. That's pretty much what I'm going to talk about too. Just knowing that my period and my hormones affect me differently than I think a lot of other women, but also who's to say that maybe some women are just maybe not healed a lot, or they aren't focusing too much on how they feel or what their body is reacting to, so they aren't really aware of how their hormones are affecting them, if that makes sense. But knowing that my hormones can be very, I want to say transformative for me. And I end up putting myself through some tumultuous times without, I have some control over this. I'm not going to sit here and play victim and say I have absolutely no control, because I do things that help me during that time that are way better coping skills, and that they do really make a difference for me. But there is also kind of the point to where you have to surrender, much like, a lot of things in life, and acceptance, surrender and acceptance, not giving up, but giving in, something I've said on here before. But yeah, knowing that, that affects me differently. I'm a very different person before I get my cycle, and just dealing with that luteal menstrual phase and how I felt so disassociated. July was good for me. I did really good in July with my hormones and shit, but God, this month was just I was so aware of it. That's something I was really proud of, was I was really aware of it. I gave myself some more grace than I usually do, which it's stepping stones. It's not always easy. But especially having the background that I have, it's grace wasn't a thing that I grew up giving to myself, or even others, to be honest, but probably gave more grace to others than myself, which is not right. But I digress. Dealing with this last one and the shift and the dissociation, was really, really rough for me, and it's so uncomfortable, and just having to surrender to that is difficult. And I think that, this whole thing I think everybody in the world right now, say a percentage of people in the world right now, I take that back, my apologies. A percentage of the people in the world right now are really, really into getting diagnosed with something. They want some sort of label to be put on one of their mental conditions or something that they're feeling. And I think that that's a whole epidemic within itself, of people wanting a label. And of course, with physical ailments, you're sick and you've been sick, you can't figure out what it is, and then you finally get a diagnosis, and it's oh, I finally know what it is. Don't get me wrong, I understand that is helpful. I mean, when I broke my wrist this last time, because I've broken my wrist a lot of times, I thought it was sprained. I ended up getting an x-ray, and then it turned out that my bone had been disintegrating, and I was glad that I found that out, right? So props to modern technology and shit, and there is room for getting a diagnosis, and it does make you feel better. But I think when it comes to the mental aspect of it, this whole autism thing, everybody joking that they're autistic and then saying that they're autistic and this and that, and then people with the ADHD, which I have, and trauma and depression and shit like this, using it as an excuse is one thing that I could talk about. That's bullshit, because you shouldn't be using it as an excuse to treat other people like shit or not get your shit done. You can accept that. If you need a day, take a day. Get it. No problem. But you're not just going to end up wasting your life and wasting everybody else's time because you can't get your shit together. And this is coming from somebody who's been very mentally ill up until maybe a year ago. So I know what you're talking about. I know how you feel, and you cope with fucking drugs and booze, which I did too, and it just doesn't work. And eventually you have to take accountability. And I think that for a lot of people, taking accountability means getting that diagnosis from some doctor who just wants to be able to label you with something. And it's funny because yesterday on the walk, like I had mentioned, I actually made a connection between the mental illnesses that are going around, which are real, believe me. But the reason that everybody's so mentally ill is social media and the fact that we're living in a world that isn't meant for us. You know what I mean? Like, we're animals. We're supposed to be hunting, gathering, sleeping, having children and living in the wild. And now we're in this like industrial, weird, complex type bullshit. And then there's too much technology. There's too much, there's too many inventions that make things too easy. And, the whole thing I've mentioned before of like, we used to be worried about getting eaten by things, and now we're worried and anxious about sending an email. It's like, we've definitely devolved as a species. You know what I mean? And that was something I heard from a content creator, and I really, really felt that. But we have devolved, and I think, like that connection I was trying to make. Yeah, this world is not meant for us and what our, ancestry, like, it's still in our DNA to be simple, primal creatures, and yet there's all this new shit, which is fun and it's cool, and we've evolved and we've built shit and everything, and that's cool and everything, but we're not supposed to be this connected with this many people. That's one of the biggest arguments against technology and social media. I think that's so relevant, is like, we're not supposed to be connected with this many people. I'm not supposed to be knowing what somebody's doing out in fucking Africa, like, I'm not. It's one thing that you get like a magazine shipment, or you go to the library back in the day and you look at books and you learn about other countries and shit. I'm not supposed to be. And then also just the desensitized, like I'm not going to be able to pronounce this word, and I can tell, when you can tell and it like sits on your tongue. Here, I'll say it a different way so then I can't say it. We're desensitized to like violence and sex and the big things that like used to shock people for good reason. We are desensitized to, and I think that that's a big thing that's fucking with our heads. But we just, and then everything being so easy and easily accessible, and the internet in general, of course we're going to have mental health issues, plus not to mention the whole, how I talk so much on here about generational trauma and shit like that. All that piled together is just gonna corrupt your brain, and some of that is out of our control, not gonna lie, but then it also is mostly in your control, because you have the power to dictate what you consume spiritually, mentally, and physically. So you have to take that accountability, but it is difficult, and this world is hard. But I was gonna, like I said earlier, I was gonna make a connection between, getting these diagnoses with, is that the right term, by the way? Like, plural diagnosis? I know it's not diagnoses. I think it's diagnosis, whatever. When people get diagnosed with ADHD, autism, PTSD, CPTSD, PMDD, BPD, it's a lot of PDs, bipolar, whatever the fuck it is, they make it their whole personality. And I think that's very similar, like with the whole LGBTQIAZQLA, whatever fucking community. They identify wholeheartedly with that, even like liberalist groups, that what the whole Antifa thing or whatever. It's like you make that your whole personality because you're empty. And then that just kind of touches on the fact that we are not individuals anymore. I walk around and I see big groups of women and males, but mostly women, and they all are wearing the same shit. There's no authenticity. There's no one thinking for themselves. It's just crazy how they are so easily brainwashing people, and it's especially it's the young folks, even the older ones, even the boomers love TikTok. So it's not just young folks, and I think a lot of young folks are kind of waking up to getting off social media and everything, but that they're all the same. Everybody's the same. There's no individuality. There's nobody wanting to be different, really. And then they just get into these groups. And I understand groups. We've talked about this before on here, where it's primal. You want to be a part of a group. It's safe to be a part of a group. You don't want to be an outsider. It's dangerous on the outside. But we also can't be so identical to each other. And it's so cringy. It's just gross to look at. Don't get me wrong. There's certain trends that I do enjoy, like there's things out there that are cool inventions, and if they're popular and I enjoy them. But when it comes to like who I am as a human being, it's like so many people are void of any true deep thinking skills, and it's crazy to look at and think about. Like, and then when they do have a deep conversation, like, oh my God, this is so deep. And it's like, no, this is just the shit you should be talking about. You shouldn't be talking about what MAC lipstick's coming out, or when Coach or whatever is dropping, whatever the fuck people are into. It's like, it's just not worth it. But, these cliques in these groups, and especially like even Republicans as well. I think that there's like groups out there that are like very right wing. And I think being totally and completely one thing in any direction, in any way, is not good, because you cut off yourself from communicating with people that are different than you and learning other things. So it's not a good thing to just cut yourself off from shit. But yeah, it's on all sides. It's everything. And I just think it's weird. I think it's bizarre. And making something your whole identity is just, instead of like looking at yourself in the mirror, being somewhat okay with who you are and not conforming to just one group so you don't have to be alone. I think that's the thing, is a lot of people are scared to be alone. And I'm scared to be alone. I don't like being alone. Being alone sucks. I spend a lot of my time alone. And, I look back at my childhood, and, I've been kind of brainwashed. I had a whole big epiphany this week, and it was kind of a little depressing. But, I spent a lot of time alone as a kid. And obviously I went to school. I had daycare. I had babysitters. My grandma watched me a lot. I spent a lot of time with my grandma. I love my grandma. I've talked about her before. But when it really comes down to it, a lot of my, especially like early teens, like 12, 13, 14, like all that, and then being in high school and stuff, I spent a lot of time alone. I was alone in the house a lot. I spent a lot of time with my phone, YouTube videos and looking things up and shit like that. So early, web access is never good for somebody. I think my phone raised me a little bit. And then having a single mom who was busy working and shit, and with her narcissistic tendencies and everything, it's just stressful, and it was a lot. And then with relationships that are so void of true connection and are like vindictive and sneaky, you end up feeling even more alone than you were just being regular alone. And nobody wants to be alone, but at the same time, it's better to be by yourself than to be conforming to ideologies and groups and letting the technology and the social media and the phones just warp your brain into being so easily manipulated. And waking up to that, I think, is so important. And one of the things that made me wake up was, there was some political shit in there that made me like, huh? A little double take, I've talked about that on here as well. But it was being diagnosed with things. I'm definitely a little woo-woo, little hippie, a lot of like not trusting within the government and everything. You guys know this. But being diagnosed with shit doesn't really mean anything to me anymore. And the reason I was thinking about this stuff was, yes, because people use it as their whole identity. Like, there's fucking 30 and 40-year-olds going around being like, oh my God, I had no idea that I was autistic. It's changed my... It's like, whatever. You're fucking autistic. You're either... You are or you're not, whoever, whatever. No, nothing matters. You are who you are. You still have to go to work the next day. You have to do whatever you have to do. What is that going to do for you? If that truly brings you peace, then great. But most of the time, figuring out what's wrong with you and like pinpointing all those things, it actually can be more stressful, and it doesn't fix anything, because you still have to wake up the next day. You still have to take your dog for a walk and pick up its shit. You still have to fucking feed your kids. You have to go to work. You have to shop. You have to do all the same things. So having some sort of diagnosis is bullshit, really. Like, that's how I think of it. And I've also made a really decent, I think it was pretty deep, actually, of a correlation. People that have physical ailments, there's a lot of people these days too, because the whole victim mentality is in the narcissism and entitlement going through generation, and then with the whole social media, because everybody can have a platform now and everybody thinks that they have something important to say when they don't. And yes, I'm a hypocrite for saying that, because here I am talking on a podcast that I created, all right? But this shit's for me. This is like a little video or audio diary for me. And people don't even fucking listen to it. And I don't care, and I still make it because I enjoy doing it. But yeah, everybody thinks that they have something to say, and they really don't. So, people will use physical ailments as their personality, just like they will with diagnosis. Like when people get diagnosed with whatever it is that they get diagnosed with via mental illness wise, or if they're gay, then that's their whole personality, whatever. But I also kind of thought, and again, this was on my walk, people with physical disabilities and shit go and try so hard to not let that define them. So with this whole mental thing, there's people that like get over it, don't get me wrong, and they just keep moving on with their life, and good for them, and that's what I aspire to be. But I feel like with, people that lose a leg, or people that lose an arm, or somebody that has like a colostomy bag, or whatever it is that's physically disrupting their life, it seems to me that a lot of people try so hard. And don't get me wrong, there's people that sit there and play victim and they whine and bitch about what they have going on with them. But a lot of them just seem to want to not be seen as that. People in wheelchairs, they want to make jokes about themselves. Like they don't want to have that type of attention because they're disabled. So why is it that when we get into like, and of course that's not everybody, but I just feel like it's like for some reason people that have mental issues, maybe they just want an excuse for their behavior that's just not justifiable and they know it? Question mark? Maybe? I don't know. But yeah, I was thinking on my walk, like, because I looked up how to tell if you have borderline personality disorder, because I just feel like these swings I have when I'm on my period and shit are so fucking like wild. And I'm like, this has to be something else, right? And then that's a whole other like belief system that I have, right? Oh, there has to be something wrong with me. And that's a big one that I kind of want to pause on. There has to be something wrong with me. There's something wrong. There has to be a bigger explanation for why I feel this way. And I don't think that is, for me, anything like victimhood wise. I just think I'm a very analytical person. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are like that want answers. They want answers as to why they feel the way they feel, why they feel the shitty way that they feel. And you're looking, but really it's just usually not that deep, or it's right in front of your face, So it's probably not borderline personality disorder. It's probably just the fact that I downplay my trauma a lot because I feel like it's not as bad as other people's, and that I should just get over it. But that's a lot of gaslighting that I still have trouble with myself and stuff like that. And I think it's just trauma in my nervous system trying to still regulate itself after removing myself from some toxic people. So I think that's probably mostly it. But I did have all the symptoms. But you can have the symptoms of like 3 different things and you could still have like nothing. You know what I mean? But I was thinking to myself, I'm like, well, okay, say somebody said that I had borderline, which if I did, I'm sure I would have been diagnosed with that by now because I've been in therapy for like 3 years, which also we're a very over-therapized nation or country. You know what I mean? Like everybody's in therapy for everything. And I definitely love therapy for me. And I think I needed that to kind of force me to take accountability for some of my shit. And then also to teach me how to be better to myself and be nicer to myself. And I think that's been helpful. I think the best way I've heard it is through actually most of my therapists, pretty much all of them have said this. They're not here to help or quote fix me because there's nothing wrong with me. They've all said that. They're just here to dust some things out of the way so I can see myself clearer. And I think that's the best way to describe therapy if you have a good therapist. And I do think therapy is good. I think that there's a lot of shitty therapists out there though, because it's a big money-making scheme, just like going to the doctor and shit like that. So it's kind of like take and give. And I used to do it a lot. Now I do it like once a week, once every other week, just to check in. I'm also a very lonely person, so I enjoy talking to somebody, once a week, once every other week. But yeah, I cut that down and it also made me take more accountability for myself, not being in therapy so much and trying to actually practice those skills and the tools that I have, because in the end, it's like, sure, you can go to therapy and work through some shit, but the real shit you have to work through is your day-to-day life. So that's where you're going to get the best experience, And also just not having any family to talk to for the most part and not having any guidance. It is helpful, like, to have somebody there. But yeah, we're definitely over-therapized. And like I was saying about the BPD, it's like, okay, well, say that somebody says I have that. because I got into a whole thing about therapy. But what does that mean? What is it? Here, let me get some water. What does it mean if I get diagnosed with that, or I get diagnosed with something else? Nothing. I still have to find a way to live with my brain every day. Just like ADHD. And, I actually, side note, with the ADHD, I didn't really realize that Adderall was this close to meth. Like, I'm pretty sure, I heard that it's like one molecule away from like meth. And it's crazy to me that like, I'm just like only a quarter of a way to like being on meth. Like when I take my Adderall. But I definitely use that as a tool, a temporary tool for now to kind of guide me through my life, to kind of see if I can figure out how to deal with my brain, accept my brain, because that's what it's all about. Because you can be told that you have this or that, but do you really want to sit there and be a victim with whatever they diagnosed you with for the rest of your life? And I just don't like that people make that into their personality and use that as an excuse as to why they're either being an asshole, they're not being accountable, they're not being reliable, or they're fucking up. Because I have this, I have that, I have this, oh, I struggle with that. It's like everybody struggles with something. You know how many people out there right now are like doing decent and they have shit that they don't even know about? And what? Especially back in the day, like they didn't know any of this shit. And they just did stuff and they still lived good lives. I'm also a big believer, and you call me woo-woo or weird for this. I'm a big believer in a lot of people that have mental, quote, unquote, disabilities or mental problems. I'm doing air quotes here. I don't think that they're problems. I think that society was based on, Rockefeller's ideology of being a worker and not a thinker. And there's a lot of free thinkers and there's a lot of different eccentric people out there. And those people to me are people with ADHD, people with bipolar, people with schizophrenia. And I think that we belong to a different realm. And I don't think that we're fit for this type of society because I don't think most humans are fit for this type of society. Same way that I talked about last week, like women aren't supposed to be hustlers, but yet society has made us into hustlers. Not that we can't hustle, not that we can't do a good job. Not saying that, just saying that that's not in our natural DNA and biology. You know what I mean? We're meant to be nurturers and slow movers and graceful. You know what I mean? Not hustling, bustling, trying to be a boss bad bitch and all this shit. Not that we can't be. Not that it's not cool to be a woman who owns something. I'm just saying it's, in my opinion, for myself, that's not how I think of it. But, I digress back into I definitely think that it's a different realm type thing. Like they talk a lot about how ADHD people were really good hunters and shit, hunters and gatherers, and that type of brain needs different type of stimulation. And I think that that's the case for a lot of people that have mental issues. And I'm tired of hearing it mentioned as a problem instead of just a small characteristic. You know what I mean? And that's even hard for me to do with myself. But, and here I am saying this, and I do take Adderall. I do take prescription medication for my brain. But like I've said before, this isn't just something I'm going to be on for the rest of my life and I accept that. No, I only take it 3 or 4 times a week. And I also kind of accept my brain. You know what I mean? I also know, I track my cycle and stuff like that. So when I'm in luteal or menstrual or whatever, I'm like, okay, well, first off, my pills don't really work during that time. That's something I've actually heard is true for a lot of women, that their Adderall does not work when they're close to their period. So I'm just like, well, maybe I just shouldn't even bother taking it. So I don't. And I kind of just try my best to ride things out and let the emotions kind of fall over me because I don't want to end up numb. And I think that's what a lot of people end up being. And I think that that's kind of the goal via big pharma and doctors and shit, is to just numb people instead of allowing them to feel things. And we also, as a society, have normalized not being uncomfortable. And you have to be uncomfortable. I actually think most of life is uncomfortable, especially when you've been through really traumatic things, or just decently traumatic things, I think that most of your life is uncomfortable, but it's finding the things that make you happy. It's rewiring your system. The things that I get the most mad about via my past and my childhood is the fact that because I had a lack of certain things and too much of some bad things, and a lot of lies and manipulation and gaslighting and the narcissism and enabling and everything, my brain didn't get wired the way that it should have. And I saw this video of a woman. She was in a domestic violence relationship, so it's a little bit different, but the narcissistic aspect of it was still there. And the way I think her new loving boyfriend had recorded a video of one of her kind of like spells of like a panic attack that she had. And I looked at it, and it was actually really, really weird because I did a lot of the same things. And she's like shaking, and her arms are up and stuff like this. And it was like a physical, like domestic violence relationship that she was in. So it's definitely different than how my childhood and shit was. But the spasming and stuff, and then my body shaking, and Kyle saw so much of it. I'm much better now. I don't do any of that stuff anymore. But, having to rewire your whole system like that, and having your nervous system, when you get into a good relationship, be so confused and like definitely self-sabotaging it, fucking with it, and being so almost like you're almost bored and you're used to the chaos. You want the chaos because you're used to things being toxic, whether it be relationships or family. You have to rewire all that. And that's what pisses me off the most. And I think that's what people are using the pills and diagnosis and identifying with their diagnosis for, is this sense of understanding, when really it's like you need to understand your nervous system. And I know it's like so woo-woo and everybody talks about it now, but it's true, because your shit's fucked up. And taking pills really isn't going to fix it. And not saying that can't be a temporary solution, because I do believe that it can be. I'm doing that now. I think a lot of like people that have addictions and they get on methadone and then they eventually get off methadone and they're sober. Sometimes it takes that. Sometimes you need help, and that's okay. But I think doing that inner work and that accountability and really looking in the mirror, like there's exercises that I've done where I just look in the mirror. I try and look at myself, because with the disassociation and stuff too, I need to look at myself a little bit to ground myself in my body again. But taking accountability, giving yourself grace, and continuing to surrender, accept, and move on. And for me, one of those things was finding God and understanding I have no control over anything. I have very, very little control of shit. So I can't sit here and just be a fucking hot mess all the time trying to run around and control everything. And that's why, I talk about how we've ended up being such a godless country and shit, even though that's not what, the Freemasons and shit, right? I think that's what I'm meaning to say. Created this and everybody, like it was a Christian country. And I think that those morals are so important, because it makes you realize, even if you just call it universe, if you don't call it God, there's something bigger than you, and you don't have control. You can choose what you want to eat. You can choose when you want to wake up in the morning. There's choices that you make that are important. But when it comes to most of the big shit and even some day-to-day stuff, things just don't work out the way that you want. And trying to run around and control everything is also another reason why I think everybody's so mad. And now I don't mean like angry. Sure, that could be, part of it, but I mean like mad, like crazy, like mad in the head, like nuts. Everybody's trying to control everything, but you really don't have any control. And then I think, kind of circling back and to end this, people getting diagnosed with things, they think that gives them some sort of semblance of control. But as for me personally, when I got diagnosed with things and people told me that they think I have something or whatever, even if it actually is physical, they told me I have Ehlers-Danlos, which is, look it up. It's a connective tissue disorder, which makes a lot of sense for like why my knees and my fucking joints are so messed up and my neck's a hot mess. But what am I going to do about that? It's literally a genetic mutation in my cells. Like there's not, it's like, I can't sit here and eat up this diagnosis and just be like, oh, woe is me. It just doesn't do anything. And it actually gives you even less control because most of the time you can't fix it. You know what I mean? So I don't know. That was just kind of, I guess, a hot take, a 30-minute hot take. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. And I was just kind of having like a little epiphany yesterday on that walk, because I'm like, why does everybody identify with these things that somebody else is telling them that they have? And that's the other thing with which I've mentioned on here before about people giving up their autonomy. Everybody's like, oh, I'm going to go to the doctor, he'll know what to do. Oh, I'm going to go to the doctor, he'll know what to do. Or in the best example, people going for their like physicals and shit and their checkups. Why are we going to the doctor when we're not sick? I don't get that. That was something Kyle mentioned to me, like his belief system on that. And also other people had mentioned it, I'm like, that actually makes a lot of sense. Why are we going to the doctor when we're not fucking sick? So they can make money, and then they can make up something wrong with you and then tell you, oh, no, you actually don't have that. Big thing with like ultrasounds and shit too with pregnant women. Another reason I'm not going to be getting ultrasounds. They will fucking worry pregnant women, saying that there's something wrong with the baby. Then they go in for like their next scan. Oh, everything's fine. And it's and that's a whole other thing where I've talked about how we're so disconnected from nature, and we are literally removing nature out of the most natural thing, which is giving birth to children. And we're scaring women into thinking that this is some sort of crazy, risky diagnosis and syndrome, when it's just being pregnant, something every other species on this fucking planet does with usually no issue. We're sitting here worrying ourselves, and it's like, when you worry and when you instill fear in people, which is what the government loves to do, they react horribly. And then they also believe that you're their only option. And what does that give everybody? Control, which is what they want anyway, and everybody knows that. It's not rocket science. But yeah, I don't know. This whole like fear-based, identifying with things somebody told you that you have, even over-identifying with trauma, which is something I actually did a lot of. And I had to kind of cut that out. And a part of it, I think, was being pitiful of myself and being victim, which is ugly. It's very unattractive. And I stopped doing that because I realized how unattractive it was, because nobody gives a fuck. Nobody fucking cares about you. For the most part. I mean, you probably have a couple people that are like, hey man, I love you. But like, for the most part, it's on you. Like, nobody gives a fuck. So stop playing victim, because it's actually really ugly. But, the whole, like over-identifying with their trauma, which is, like I said, something that I've done, is like, you actually just end up re-traumatizing yourself. So then you end up in this continuous loop of not being able to get out of shit. And that's where like that old school mentality of stuff that can kind of be toxic kind of comes in a good way, where it's like, can't over-identify with shit. And sometimes you just have to move the fuck on. It's not the whole, forgiving and forgetting. It's you forgive, but you don't forget. And you pick and choose your battles, and you move on, but you take the lessons that come, and you keep it pushing. That's, all those things. You have to keep it pushing. So there is that whole buck up mentality, but then the new age shit that actually is pretty helpful is like, hey, you can feel sad. You don't have to bury everything down like everybody in your family did for generations. You can feel things. You can break off relationships with people if you want. You can set boundaries, but also don't be a little bitch because you're just going to end up holding yourself back if you're doing that shit. If you're over-identifying with stuff and, closing yourselves off to one type of group or anything like that. And like I mentioned before, in closing, I think people that have interesting things with their brains, you're not wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. If anybody says that there's something wrong, or they've acted like something is wrong with you, fuck them, because I genuinely don't think so. I think that there's a lot of different realms out there. I think there's a lot of spiritual shit going on. There always has been. There's a reason why doctors, for the most part, have separated the mind and body, because then when you separate the mind and body, you can separate the spirit and the soul, and then they can make money off of two separate things, when really those are connected. So a lot of people are sick because their mind's fucked up, and it ends up going into your body too. Dr. Gabriel Maté talks a lot about that, how it's not just... sorry, I paused this. Dr. Gabor Mate talks a lot about this stuff. His name, G-A-B, did I say J? Gabor and then Mate. How he talks a lot about how the mind and the body are actually connected, and that has a lot to do with stuff. And he's a very brilliant man. Helped me a lot with when I was coming out of toxic shit with my family. And when I say my family, I usually just mean my mom. But yeah, I mentioned before I brought him up, there's a lot of spiritual stuff going on. And I think that was another planned thing with the government is, of course, getting rid of that Christianity type of feel in this country and separating, people from their spirituality. And there's a lot of stuff out there, like, the fact that we're like, I think someone kind of mentioned it saying like we're like electromagnetic. And so just think of when you're upset and somebody hugs you that you love and trust and then you feel better. That type of shit is like a spiritual, like energetic, magnetic pole type thing. And there's like a lot of really, really like woo-woo shit out there, but it actually makes sense when we think about it. So look that stuff up. It's weird. I'm not good at explaining it, so I'm not going to try because I'm going to sound ignorant, and I'm kind of ignorant to it. But yeah, I think there's a lot of spiritual shit, and there's nothing wrong with you if you're a little mentally woo-woo because I think everybody is in their own way, and we don't need to just eat up these things that people tell us that we are, because we're so much more than that. Always so much more than that. And stop trusting doctors wholeheartedly. Like, they're not your friend. But yeah, I don't know. That was supposed to be like a 15-minute hot take, and as per usual, I ramble. But I hope that you guys enjoyed that. I don't know. That was just something I thought about yesterday, and I thought it was kind of interesting. I'm sure I've brought up some of that stuff before. But yeah, and I am trying to get Kyle on the next pod. I have a whole outline of what I wanted to talk about with him. So hopefully I'll be able to record that soon. We've just been busy. We're moving and shit. So, yeah, we've been all over the place, and I'm excited for what's to come because this shit means like everything's going to pop off in a good way. I have a good feeling, and I'm ready for it. I feel the most ready I have ever felt for anything in my life. And I feel really confident in myself for the most part, and within my relationship with Kyle and with myself and with God. And that always can use more work, but I'm working on it. So, but yeah, love and peace to everybody. And I recorded this on Saturday, so I hope you guys have a good weekend and enjoy yourselves. Try and get some sun, get outside, and worry less. All right, see ya. Bye.